Today we have a Carter dual action pump from this one here came off of a 49 Packard, but this particular pump will fit anywhere from 38 to 50 on the Packards. We're going to go through it and fix it up for the customer. First order of business is marking the location for the inlet and outlet. We want to make sure that this goes right back on the same way it came off. Make a mark, draw a picture, take a picture. However, just make sure it goes back on the same way it came off. You got to remove these 10 screws. And be careful with the last one. This is a strong spring underneath here. Here's that spring for the vacuum side. Use your inlet and outlet valves. Now this particular one I won't bother removing the fittings. There's not much that can get stuck behind them. The ones I take out are the 90-degree ones. So we're going to set this aside. Now your vacuum diaphragm should just pull right straight up. There's no hook or anything on this particular pull rod on the Carter pumps. They just use the arm hits up against it. Now underneath that diaphragm you got a seal. We'll remove that. You're not going to reuse it. This aluminum piece right here is a cover for the horsehair filter that sits down inside it. To remove it, don't be scared. Just pry up real easy on either side. You're just breaking loose these little dimples that are in the casting. This is a piece of, it's a soft aluminum. Now most of the time, the wire that holds the hair in there, or the filter, it's usually right up by the top. It's easy to get out. Just grab it with a pair of pliers and pick it up. Get a thin pair of needle nose, go down the side, and slide that out. You can put it back in. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Let's clean out this area. I like to clean it out only because I don't want all this stuff getting in my glass beading tank and plugging everything up. Flip it over. Now we can attack the fuel side. This is one of those fittings that I do remove. So we'll get this out of here. The other side has a straight fitting. Oh yeah, nice and tight. This is something that I can't stress enough. You'll notice Teflon tape, and if you look down the side you'll see it goes right across the fitting, right across the hole. This stuff will shred and get stuck in the valves and keep the pump from working. Best to use the Teflon paste. Makes it a lot easier, and that stuff won't plug up anything. Mark your location for the inlet and outlet. Mark both pieces, even though this will only go on one way. I like to mark it anyway, it just kind of speeds things up a little bit. Remove these 8 screws, and we'll take this section off. Remember removing the last screw. The spring underneath the diaphragm here isn't as strong as the vacuum side, but it can pop up. Underneath you'll find the valves, the inlet and outlet valves. These are the inlet, that's the outlet. The fuel will come in through here. The pump will pull it down. The diaphragm will pull it down through these 2 valves and push it out. It's kind of confusing is to let you pull in a whole bunch of fuel, but you can only let so much get out through this hole. We want to remove these 2 screws so you can separate these 2 parts. And this one's going to be hard to do. We'll just set this aside for now. One thing I want to show you is a lot of these pumps, Carter drilled these holes to 1/2 inch. You're going to put a 3/8 bolt through it, so it's going to dance around. In order to cure that, they stuck this cardboard sleeve right in the hole, and now your 3/8 bolt will go through and keep the pump centered. Just don't lose those, you'll be in trouble. You want to remove the spring. On Carter pumps, you have to remove the spring, remove this soft aluminum plug, pull the pin out, and pull the arm out in order to get the diaphragm out. So we'll get to it right now. Be careful of the spring, it'll take off. There's something else to look for in a Carter pump. This pump has never been touched since, well, probably 1950 something. And down inside here, in the center of this pin, there's a little clip. And the reason for the clip is in case this pressed in plug falls out, the pin won't work its way out. Well, I've never seen that happen. But anyway, in order to do this, you got to get this. You have to get this clip out of here. Sometimes they come out easy. Sometimes they don't. Just keep digging away at it, you'll get it. So rather than sit here and watch me dig away at it, I'll be right back. Okay, I got it. There's our little clip. And don't worry about breaking it or losing it. You're going to get a new one in the kit, along with a new pin. Get a nice sharp chisel. Come in from both sides. Just keep hitting it. It'll come up. You're not gonna reuse that. Take some of the pressure off the pin and slide it. I'll use a better pair of needle nose. and you'll push that pin right out. The new one comes in the kit. Push down on the diaphragm, slide the arm out. It was hooked on the diaphragm through there. Once that arm is out, the thing is, the diaphragm's kind of stuck in there with a seal. Just convince it to come out of there. Here's the old diaphragm. Seal was bad. That's why all this is covered with oil. And all in there is covered with oil. So we're going to clean it up. But first let's get this apart. It's not unusual for these to be stuck. So what I do is I get my biggest screwdriver, put it in there, give it the shock treatment. Same thing with the other side. In the event that these do break, you have to do a lot of drilling, and trying to replace that screw is not an easy task, because that lock washer is the exact same size as the screw head. And if you were to pick up a regular 1/4 inch lock washer, you'll find that it's a lot bigger and it won't fit through the hole. Separate these two halves. This is your pulsator gasket. Man, this thing is terrible. This is what the gas does to these things. One of my pet peeves with Carter is they stick a filter screen inside here. How much do you think was getting through that? No, nothing. Just some of the crud that accumulates in these pumps. It's picked up by the fuel tank, and it sends it right up to the carburetor. Now we want to, don't skip this step. We want to knock out these valves. So what we're going to do is take a 1/8 inch punch, place it right in the center, and just steadily tap. It eventually knocks it through. You don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to hit it real hard. Just to tap, 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 tap. And there's your valves, still stuck in there. Valve and the spring. Turn it over and do the other side. This one came out all in one piece. This is ready to get some of this oily mess off of here, and then go to the bead blasting tank. We'll be back shortly. Don't worry, I heard you screaming. What about that vacuum side? This pump is unique, this style of pump. 2 aluminum freeze plugs cover over the valves. We got to get them out of there. So set it in a vise. Just pry that one right out of there. It's the same valve as the other two, the other three. Get your 1/2 inch, 1/8 inch plug, punch, set it down inside, knock it down through. This one here is the bottom of the valve, just like on the fuel side. Just constant tap, and then drive it right through the bottom. That's why the rag is there. And it's empty. This is ready for the bead blaster. You're not going to reuse any of these parts. And I think that's all the disassembly there is. Next up, putting it back together. While I'm waiting for the paint to dry, the clear coat, I thought I'd give you a couple of tips here. In order to do that, I got to take the camera off of this tripod. You call in and order a kit. This is basically what you're going to get. Diaphragm assembly for the fuel side. This is what you get for the vacuum side, and I'll explain that more in a second. Pump to block gasket. There's the pull rod. Those three are for the fuel side valves, and those two there are the vacuum side. A new pin, new clip, new seal, soft plug, and there's those two freeze plugs for the vacuum side. Normally we don't ask you to grind off and reuse anything. This particular pump, this particular style Carter pump, is an exception. This is what you've taken out of it. As you can see, it's all swedged together. So what we ask you to do is grind off this here, knock out that pull rod, but save this washer right here. What you're going to reuse is this plate, the back plate, and you're going to reuse that washer. Fairly simple, but when you get to that washer, the hole's a little too small. You're going to have to drill it out to 1/4 inch. That's the only miserable part of this particular pump. And that's about it. This is what you end up with. I've got new plates on here, but there's the new pull rod that you get in your kit. There's the washer you drilled out to 1/4 inch. It's the paper washer, the Bellevue washer, and the nut. Crank them down. Just make sure it's good and tight and that the diaphragm can't spin. I also want to show you the difference between the original diaphragm assembly and what we give you. We can't copy that, so we've come up with this. It works. You get a new spring, new pull, everything is new. This original one went down inside the casting and it didn't do too good. That's why the thing's covered with oil. This one here will sit right down in the casting. There's a little shelf in there, and that sits right on it, and you seal. This is your sealing surface, and inside of here, when this gets pulled into the pump, that seal goes up to the big part of the pull rod, and it keeps oil from coming out. I think it's time for some reassembly now. When it's time for reassembly, here's some important notes. Make sure this area here is flat. You can do that, that's kind of optional. And this area, anywhere that the two surfaces are going to meet, they need to be flattened out. Run it on a belt sander if you have one. Get a big piece of sandpaper and lay it on a piece of glass and just keep rubbing the thing until it gets nice and flat. This area here and this area. You also want to make sure the valve seat area is all nice and clean. Time for some valves. Just spring on with the smallest end of it against the head of the rivet, large end, and that's going to go right onto it. Set it in the hole. Get a flat punch and just tap. You're pressing that into that hole so it comes through about 1/16 of an inch. All the valves go in that same way. Turn it over. Make sure this area is nice and clean. Valve assembly. And tap it in. That's a little better than a 1/16. Say more like an 1/8, but it's fine. Take your pulsator. That's what this is. This area here is going to cover this area. That's the out. Fuel's going to come up through that hole and try to go out through this fitting up to your carburetor. Line up these two holes. Put the top plate on. Remember to line up your index marks. Install these two screws. And I went and put my screwdriver back. Now we want to make sure these go in good and tight. So give them an extra. Once they bottom out, give them an extra little turn. You should be able to blow air in and not suck it out. You should be able to suck air out and not blow it in. Perfect. Vacuum. Your vacuum side valves. Obviously you're not going to put a valve into that, you're going to put it into this one here. Make sure it's on something that's good and flat. Do the same thing you did with the fuel. The other side's a little tricky because it's way down inside. What I do is I drop this in first. Get a pair of needle nose. Hold onto the rivet and tip it over. Then pull it back out and try it again. Now it's halfway standing up. Get your 2 freeze plugs. Just set it down into the hole and give it one whack. These are easy to test because you do the same thing. Gonna blow air in, can't pull it out. Pull air out, can't blow it in. Perfect. Onto the body. If you have any of those scruffy pads around, cut one up to replace this. The breather that was in there before. And the wire retainer. We do the same thing and then just set it down just below the surface. The cover for it. Once you get that down there, take your you can take your screwdriver, or if you have a punch, just dimple that casting again. It'll hold it in there. Install the new seal. That's done. Time for the diaphragm assembly. What we're going to do is push this down. Here's that seat that I was talking about, the casting that this edge sits on. You're going to push this down to expose that inside. And then the arm is going to sit right into it. Just like that. Put the pin in, line it up. Make sure it goes down all the way. You can do one of two things. You can replace that pin that I pulled out of there earlier. I don't. This soft plug presses in so hard, there's no way it's going to pop back out again. So that's all I use for it. Once that plug is in, and you can use that clip if you want for added security, but I don't think it's necessary. Put the spring in. Be careful it doesn't jump out at you. And we're ready to put this puppy back together. Find your reference mark. Make sure that goes back in the same spot that was before. Put the screw through. get the screw cut. Just run it down a few threads. Do the same thing to all 8 screws in this particular one. One thing to note is on the normally on the Carter diaphragms, they're just a tad bigger on the outside diameter than these holes. Most of the time it's on the 6 screw diaphragms. This one here happens to be the 8 screw, and they're pretty close to lining up anyway. But if you do happen to have a problem and the holes, the diaphragm seems to be a little too big, the way to get around it is pull this arm, pull the arm up, it'll pull the diaphragm down inside, and the outside diameter will pull in, and you should be able to line up the screws that way. Now we want to bring these screws down just so they start touching this casting. You don't want to bring them all the way down. Okay, once all these screws are down, so there's still play in there, you don't want them down tight. Get something to use for leverage. I use an adjustable wrench, and I put it on the arm. What we want to do is pull that till it stops. By doing that, you're preloading the diaphragm. You make it so it'll last longer. It doesn't stretch. Tighten down 4 of the screws all the way. And there's a couple extra ones. Now you can tighten them all down. If you wanted to do a quick test, make sure everything's working, while you got that adjustable wrench on there, here's your inlet. Put your finger over the inlet and work the arm. You should feel suction there, and you should feel pressure on the outlet. Time for the vacuum side. First you want to put a little oil on this seal. We don't want that pull rod to run it dry. Put the spring on. Find your reference mark, which on this one is right here at the very tip. We want to stick 2 screws in, one opposite each other. Run it down to get one of the screws caught. And then get the one on the other side. Now here's a good example of what happens. When that spring starts pushing down on the diaphragm, it pulls the diaphragm inside. So now the screws don't line up. To get around that, put your adjustable or whatever you use to move that As you can see the diaphragm coming back out. Screws line up. It's handy if you have an extra hand. Get it caught, and then now you should be able to catch the other ones. But this is one of those instances where it pulls the diaphragm in and it gets caught behind the casting. The edge of this goes up and now you can't catch it. So we have a fix for that. I just wanted to take this casting back off to show you what I was talking about. It pushes it down inside. Now these holes don't line up. You can't get the screws in. By pushing that diaphragm down, the arm I mean, by pushing the arm down, it picks it back up, and hopefully it doesn't fall off. Picks it back up and flattens it out. Now you can get the screws stuck. Get them halfway down, at least until the casting is almost flat, but don't tighten them all the way up. After you get all these screws caught and you take the pressure off of it so that it flattens out, all the screws line up, and put this diaphragm in the neutral position so that it's flat. Not all the way up, not all the way down. Tighten down all the screws. I went ahead and did it because the maintenance crew is out blowing leaves around and I can't even hear myself talk. So I went ahead and tightened everything down. And that brings it to the end. Put the block gasket back on and it's ready to go. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see any more of these videos. Thanks for watching.